Hello everybody, welcome to the United Stand. My name is Levin2K and I'm here to break down the press conference by the manager. Of course, as always, there's a press conference before the game and we'll get to that. But there was some breaking news that I think definitely needs to be addressed beforehand, right? Martial his agents come out and essentially said Martial is looking to leave the club as soon as possible, ideally in January. And I think it's very important that we discuss this because, of course, it's something that we've sort of been discussing. I think everybody's been keeping their eye on who are going to be the striker options for Ralf Rangnick. And from what Martial's agent is saying, it doesn't look like it's going to be Martial because he is looking to leave the club. I'll read the quote here from Sky Sports News. It says, Martial's agent, Philippe Lamboli, hopefully I'm saying that right, Anthony wishes to leave the club in January. He just needs to play. He doesn't want to stay in January, and I will speak to the club soon. See, now that the end bit is a bit frustrating to me because it's like, what? So you haven't even spoken to the club yet, but you decided to tell big Sky Sports News. Okay, fair enough. You do your thing. Look, I want to know from you guys in the comment section below how you feel about this. I know a lot of people have an attachment to Martial. It was just yesterday night when I was talking about, Martial of old, the one who looked like he could be, the next big thing, the one who looked like he could be the next Thierry Henry. I think that's what Jordan said on the show as well. And it just hasn't quite panned out that way. And from his perspective, it looks like he wants to take that next step. Now, I know a lot of people will be frustrated about this. A lot of people will be angry at the fact that, look, the new manager's just come in, you've barely trained. I think Martial's had one training session, but he got injured before or during he got injured in the training session. That's why he wasn't involved in any of the games in the past couple of days. And so a lot of people going, bro, chill, man. Like, come back from injury, fight for your spot, and let's see, what can happen. Who knows? Maybe the new manager can actually help you improve and develop, which is something that I think a lot of the players, including Martial, haven't really been able to do under previous management. And let's see where you can take this. Maybe you can be that guy that steps in once Cavani leaves, or even before Cavani leaves. Maybe you get in ahead of Greenwood, and that's something to talk about. Like, a lot of people will be frustrated that this hasn't been allowed to play out. And I get that. I totally get that as well. There is an element of, look, stay and fight for your spot. Of course, as fans of the club, that's what we want players to do. We want everybody to want to fight for their spot and look to try to get into that first team. But when you sit there and look at it from Martial's perspective for a second, and I think that's important because ultimately people will do what's best for them, right? Everybody's perspective is different. And when you look at it from Martial's perspective, the reality is he is somebody who's 26, he's entering his prime. When you look at the conversations that have been had around the striker situation, if we're being frank, anybody that discusses, who's going to be a loser now that Ralf Rangnick's here? Majority of people say, Martial, right? Majority of people go, yeah, Martial's probably the loser, right? We have Ronaldo, we have Cavani who's leaving, and he's been pretty good, so we got to play him before he leaves. Greenwood's on the rise, Rashford. And people constantly just sort of acknowledge the fact that, yeah, Martial's probably the loser of the situation. And from Martial's perspective, going into his prime, I don't think he's right now in a position where fighting for his spot is the best thing for his career. I'm somebody of the belief that, look, Martial, he's had his chance to prove himself and it just hasn't worked out. The past year or so, right, it's just not been great. Of course, he had that season before where he's, scored a bunch of goals and he looked like maybe this thing was working out. But the past year, it's not been great. And I just think he needs to play football. I think he needs to be in a situation where there's a bit less pressure and he can just play week in, week out. Because the player that was there, the AM11 days, I don't believe that player is just gone completely. And maybe some people go, Levin, man, you just like Martial. And I can't lie, I do, man. He was a great player. And we always joke about watching highlight reels and whatnot, but go look at the highlight reels of Martial when he was number 11 playing for Jose before we got Sanchez. That was a serious footballer. And I like to think that player is still in there somewhere. And I think the only way you're going to get that player is if he gets to go out somewhere and play football regularly. And the reality is that probably can't happen here because we just have so many, strikers who are before him in that pecking order, and rightfully so. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's okay that he wants to leave. I think it's the best thing for him. And I don't think we should, necessarily be hostile about that. Now, the way you go about it, I think is important. And I'm not a fan of the whole agent thing. That just personally just not a fan of that. The fact that his agents actually just said he's not spoken to the club first is a bit frustrating. But ultimately, in terms of the decision of him wanting to move, I don't think there's a problem with that. I think it works out for both sides. If we can get something out of him as well, that would be great. I'm seeing a lot of people already suggesting something. It's funny how a lot of people sort of already have yeah, Marshall, you want to leave? Cool. Can we get De Jong? Can we get this player? Can we get that player? You guys are great. But I'm sure there will be plenty of, discussion now about what sort of deals we can start to see from him. Clayton Daniels, shout out to Clayton Daniels. He came over Super Chat. He said, I'm with Martial and Donny wanting to leave. These players want to play and World Cup is around the corner. Do what's best for you and your career. Yeah, like I totally get that with Martial. You're right. I didn't even think of the World Cup aspect of it, right? Martial, he missed the World Cup last time, right? And I'm sure this time round he won't want to be missing it. And the only way he's going to get into that team now, realistically, is by playing week in, week out and showing he can be of service. So Martial swap for Harry Kane. I'm seeing a lot. We're gonna see a lot of swap deals recommended and suggested. Let me know though what you would do about this Martial situation. Let me know how you feel in general, right? Do you wish this maybe wouldn't happen and he'd stay at the club, or are you sort of okay with the idea of him moving on? It's best for his career. It's time to go. I'm leaning more towards that side. I think it is probably the best thing for him as a striker, about to hit his prime, arguably started his prime already, looking to try to get back into form. Yeah, he's got to be playing in. Haaland news. Guys, before we move on to the press conference, this is a video about the press conference, but we haven't actually talked much about the press conference because of the Martial transfer request. But on the topic of agents, speaking about their players, of course, Raiola's been talking a bit again, as he always does. He was talking about Haaland, and I don't want to talk much about Haaland, but he essentially just tried to slag off Man United, saying, oh, Man City have won 5 Premier Leagues, more than United. Look, Gary Neville said it on Twitter, and I don't agree much with Gary Neville nowadays, but look, I understand United, we've not been great recently, we've not won titles in a while, but to just completely erase our history of titles is pretty funny by Raiola, but I'm sure he's just trying to get a rouse out of people, and it's working. And he also spoke about Pogba. He was asked if Pogba could go to Bayern. He said impossible, no, because they won't pay them kind of wages. And he sort of said, look, there's offers on the table, but we also have an offer from United, and we'll wait to see what's best for Paul. So I don't know how does Raiola get away with this? How does he get away with just slagging off the club, and he's just in negotiations with the club at the same time? Doesn't sit well with me. You know what I mean? Like, something about it just don't feel right. Like, he actively was just slagging off the club when talking about Haaland. Then he gets asked a question about Pogba, and it's just like, yeah, we're talking to Man United. We'll make the right decision. It's like, what? Anyway, let me move on. Look, we had a press conference, a pretty short press conference, but there was still things to discuss. Ralph Rangnick, of course, what is it, his third press conference now, or second? Look, Rangnick's been in for a bit more now, and so I think it was good to sort of get that week update, right? We sort of had a lot of questions about, what have you been able to do? And it was like, I've been here for an hour. Like, I've only had an hour with the players. It's been like only a couple of days. I've not been able to do much. And even now, it's only a week, so it's still not much, but there is a bit more. We'll start off with what Ralph Rangnick said about Paul Pogba. So Ralph Rangnick was asked about Paul Pogba. He essentially said, look, I've spoken to Paul. We spoke on the phone for 10, 15 minutes. He is expected to come back actually to the UK today. He's in Dubai recovering, if you guys don't know. And he's expected to come back today. Obviously, he had that sort of thigh injury and he's still recovering from that. And it's going to be a couple more weeks, right? It will be a bit more time. He obviously is a couple weeks away from fully recovering. And then after that, he's going to have to get back into match fitness, right? So it's going to be a while till we see Pogba, I think. But, we've been talking on this channel about where Pogba can fit in. And I think one of those 10 positions probably is going to be where we see him, right? And I think Rangnick will be, interested in using him. Of course, there will be conversations about whether he actually wants to stay and whether he will be committed to the cause. And if it's anything like the Martial situation, then maybe not. So we still got to see and wait what happens with Pogba. I'm wishing him a steady and speedy recovery. And let's see how that one plays out. He was also asked about the January transfer window, right? He was asked whether, look, you've had, a week to sort of assess the squad, see what's going on. Is this, a squad that needs improvement in the window? Do you have an idea of what you want to do in that January transfer window? Or, you know, are you still sort of assessing things? And I think Rangnick sort of gave the safe answer. He talked about how big the squad is and you know, what that sort of means. In fact, I'll read the actual full quote for you because it's quite a long quote, but I'll still read it out for you. He said, "I've got to know them better in this week. I saw most of them play in the 2 games and had 3, 4, or 5 training sessions this week, but it's still too early to speak about what might happen in the winter transfer window. If I look at the number of players we have, it's still a big squad. We definitely do not have not enough players. We need to make sure that players want to stay here. If they see not getting enough game time here, it might make sense to speak individually with the players to see if a loan deal might make sense. But right now, it's still too early to speak about that." It might not be too early, Ralph, because, you know, with Martial's comments, that's definitely a conversation that's going to be had, right? And I think Ralph's sort of approach to it is, look, I want to speak to the players. If certain players feel like they want more game time or they need more game time and I can't guarantee them that, then yeah, let's look at some loan options, right? And I think that's probably going to be something that happens with the likes of Martial. Of course, I think everybody will be waiting to hear about what happens with Donny, because Donny's another one of those players where before Ralph came in, all the reports suggested he was going to try look for a move in January because he wasn't getting enough game time. And we'll see how much Ralph plays him. If Ralph doesn't play him, you know, as much as he wants to play, then that's going to be another one of those conversations that needs to be had. So Ralph, you know, with 1 training session, we looked quite good. He's now had a couple more, 3, 4, 5 training sessions, different groups though. You know, he did mention the fact that, you know, the teams are sort of split. So he's not trained with everyone together. And I doubt he'll get much chance to do that just because of how intense the fixture list is. But he has had a chance to see certain players play and train, and he's getting a better understanding of the squad. So looking forward to that. Let me read some chats. We've got a super chat here. McTominay is a new Fellaini, says Kishan. Appreciate the super chat. People saying childish from Martial. Martial must go for free. A lot more. I'm seeing a lot of people aren't happy about the whole Martial thing. And look, I get why you won't be happy, but ultimately, I think it's best for both sides that he moves on. He's a striker entering the prime of his career. He's not really going to get much first team football here. He's not going to be a guaranteed starter here because of the amazing striking options we have. I think it's best for him to move on. Now, I do agree that the handling of the situation isn't ideal, right? And we addressed that. You know, his agent coming out to Sky Sports and literally admitting to the fact that he's not spoken to the club, but yet he's still telling the whole world Martial wants to leave, isn't ideal. And that's never going to be something that I think anybody likes that's a fan. And so we'll see how this sort of plays out from now. But I don't think anybody should be upset that Martial wants to go. Like, it's pretty understandable, right? He's a player who could be in the French squad if he's playing first team football consistently. He's a player who he needs to play football to try and re-find that form he was once in a couple of years ago. And this probably isn't the place for him to do that right now. That's just the hard truth. What club will Martial end up at? That is the question, I think. I don't know. I'm sure a lot of people will be throwing Newcastle's name in there. Of course, they got plenty of money to spend. Who knows how that one could play out? I'd love to see. I'd love to see what sort of rumours will swell up now. I'm sure Romano will be fielding a lot of phone calls. Rangnick was asked about the goalkeeper situation. I know Mark wasn't happy about this, but Rangnick was asked about the United goalkeeper situation. Essentially just sort of asked, hey, look, you know, you got loads of goalkeepers. We've actually seen all 3 of your goalkeepers within a week. Of course, shout out to Tom Heaton, got his first team debut in the Champions League. What a feeling that must have been. Dean Henderson obviously played as well, and David De Gea has been in brilliant form all season long. And this was Ralph's response. I'll read it out to you. Ralph said, "We have quite a few top goalkeepers, and we could see against young boys, both goalkeepers did well that played. With David De Gea, we have a top goalkeeper as the number 1. That's important, right? He did acknowledge the fact that, you know, David De Gea is the number 1, and I think he means that, you know, beyond just the fact that he wears the number 1 shirt. Like, I think he genuinely means that David De Gea is the number 1. So this is the position that we have a minimum 3, if not 4 or 5 good goalkeepers. Of course, we still got Lee Grant kicking it, and I'm sure, you know, Nathan Bishop in the academy as well will be, you know, poking his head around the corner, seeing if he can get in. And Ralph said, we will see what the situation will be like in the winter. There might be one or two of them wanting to go out on loan somewhere, but on the other hand, we have to keep in mind that we have the 3 competitions in the next 6 months: FA Cup, Premier League, Champions League, and we definitely need 3 top goalkeepers in order to make up for a player being injured or suspended. Now, I think that's very telling. Look, he acknowledged the fact that some of them might want to go on loan. I think we all know who that is. Like guys, we you can read between the lines a bit, right? We ain't got to pretend we don't know who you're talking about, Big Ralph. We know who you're talking about. Realistically, Dean Henderson might want to go out on loan if he's not playing enough. And Ralph said he's open to that, but at the same time, he also does say, but if we're looking at the club's perspective and what's important for the club, it is important that the club has 3 goalkeepers available. We have a lot of competitions. You never know what could happen. David De Gea could be out. Knock on wood. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But you got to protect yourself. And I think this is going to be the thing that is always an issue. I say issue, but it's always going to be a factor in football, right? There's players' perspective, there's clubs' perspectives, and everybody's trying to protect their own ideals. And this applies to the Martial situation and it applies to this goalkeeper situation. Dean Henderson's perspective, he wants to play first team football. He wants to be, England's first choice keeper for the World Cup. He's probably, Dean Henderson, right? Before the Euros, people were arguing that Dean Henderson could be the number 1 over Pickford because Pickford wasn't in great form last season or whatever. Euros happens, Pickford makes it clear he's the number 1. But now, based off of this season, Dean Henderson isn't even the number 2 in the pecking order, right? Like you'd probably say it's Pickford, Ramsdale, then Dean Henderson, right? Maybe even Nick Pope or, Sam Johnston or something like that, So if you're Dean Henderson, from his perspective, he'll be thinking, I want to play, I need to play football. So if you're not going to play me here, loan me out and let me try, fight for my spot in that England's place and prove to people I am a top goalkeeper. But Ralph also acknowledge the club's perspective because, yeah, cool, that's what you want to do, Dean, and yeah, fair enough, that might be good for you. But for us, we need goalkeepers. We don't know what's going to happen. We can't guarantee that David De Gea can, Iron Man tank through the whole season as the number 1 keeper. Like, we might need to keep you just to protect ourselves. And that is something that, will just happen. I'd love to see how this plays out. I'd love to see whether he does, give Dean some time in order to sort of appease him for that sake. I'm sure a lot of people will be furious at that, right? Like I know a lot of people will be thinking, absolute rubbish, right? David De Gea should play. He's been brilliant this season and he should play without a doubt. And I would agree. I think, realistically, the Dean Henderson situation is something that just represents mismanagement at the club. I think regardless of whether you think Dean Henderson is a good keeper, an overrated keeper or a bad keeper, he probably should have been moved on. And if he wasn't going to be moved on, then we shouldn't have extended David De Gea. Like, I hate to sound like a broken record, but it does just represent mismanagement at this football club. And hopefully this is one of the wrongs that Ralph Rangnick can start to make right by making a decision. And I think if he was going to make a decision right now, it probably would be, to let go of Dean Henderson and pursue with David De Gea. And I think that would probably be the right decision. So we'll see how that one plays out. That is the goalkeeper situation for the people who are wondering. He was also asked about Norwich, and this is one of the things I am most excited about when it comes to Ralph Rangnick. I think all of us will remember Ole Gunnar Solskjaer press conferences where he's asked about the opposition team and he answers the question by going, yeah, Norwich, Norwich, they play the Norwich way, so of course we got to be careful of Norwich because they play the Norwich way. So, and I think we don't miss those days. I'll say it like that. We don't miss those days. And I think with Ralph Rangnick, those days are fully gone. We're not going to hear any nonsense about, yeah, Norwich play the Norwich way. So we got to be careful of them. We will get actual answers in regard to how Norwich play, how they set up, and why we should fear them. And Ralph actually answered this question incredibly well. And so this is what he said. He said, they have improved since the change of managers. Of course, Norwich have now have Dean Smith as a manager instead of Daniel Farke. And he said they play a little bit more direct, a little bit more vertical than they did with Daniel Farke. So it will be a challenge at Carrow Road, but we want to improve our performance. We want to build on what we showed against Crystal Palace and hopefully get the next win tomorrow. Now, look, spot on. I think anybody that's watched a bit of, Dean Smith's Norwich will know that they don't play that same way that Daniel Farke played, where they are a bit more direct. And I think a lot of people expected that when Dean Smith came in, a bit. At times watching Norwich when they were under Daniel Farke, it was a bit frustrating. You sort of saw a team trying to play away and they didn't have the players or the quality to be able to play that way in the Premier League against other top opposition. And I think, Dean Smith's come in and, shored them up a little bit, right? Made them a bit harder to play against, made them, a bit more efficient in that sense where they're not trying to do things that they just don't have the players to do. And so, they will be a bit more difficult to play against than Daniel Farke's Norwich. But does that mean we should be scared of them? Look, famous last words, right? Famous last words, but I don't think we should be scared of Norwich. I think, realistically, this is a game where we can expect to see another dominant performance. And I think that will be the expectation from Ralph. And hopefully with a couple more training sessions under his belt, I don't think that should be a problem whatsoever, right? I just don't think that will be something that we struggle with. Ralph was also asked about any doubts for the game, right? Any injury doubts, anybody that will potentially be missing. Of course, a lot of people who watched the game, who were at the game, obviously would have seen what happened to Aaron Wan-Bissaka at the end of it. And I hope he's doing a lot better now. I hope he's recovering, but obviously he was stretchered off. And so people were wondering what was wrong with him. I'm sure there'll be people who go, yeah, I don't think it matters because I don't think he'd be starting on the weekend anyway. And maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. But Ralph did say, we have 2 or 3 question marks behind players, but they haven't shown up yet. Aaron received 1 or 2 knocks in the game. There's still a question mark behind Matic, who had sort of a cold. I wouldn't call it a flu. He had a negative test for COVID. When he said that, by the way, I was like, Matic got a cold? A COVID crisis potentially? Question mark. But he did clarify that, no, it's not COVID. He tested negative for COVID. He's just feeling a bit poorly, a bit under the weather. Understandable. So, look, based off of that, I don't think either of those 2 are going to start, right? I think both of them would have been involved in the squad. And so, yeah, you're missing bench options, which obviously isn't ideal because, you never know what can happen in a game. You might need to sub on one of those 2. But realistically, I don't think that affects our starting 11. I think we'll be fine. I didn't expect Aaron to play on the weekend, and I didn't expect Matic to play either. So that's all. It's funny. I'm doing a whole video just talking about like all the stuff Ralph's saying, and the chat. Nobody even cares. Nobody cares about what I'm saying. Everybody's just focused on Martial and where he could end up. We'll talk about it a bit once we talk about the last sort of important comment from Ralph's press conference. He was asked about the preparation and the week of training he's had, and he said, we trained in 2 different groups before the game on Wednesday. The group that played against Palace had a day off on Tuesday, and they trained separately than the group that played against Young Boys. So with that, right, the fact that the groups trained separately probably means that we can expect to see a very similar lineup to what we saw against Crystal Palace. Like I wouldn't be surprised if it's an unchanged lineup, actually. Like I would not be surprised if the team that plays against Norwich is the exact same team that beats Crystal Palace. They train differently, they train separately. And just in terms of recovery time and whatnot, yeah, I think it just makes perfect sense that it will be a very, very similar lineup, if not the same lineup. So I won't be expecting too many changes there. And let me know, though. Let me know what you would change to the lineup against Norwich. Hopefully we can start to see certain players come back from injury. Of course, we'd all love to see Varane come back in. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who want to see Cavani get back involved as well. It's never ideal when you're missing 2 players as good as those 2. So, yeah, that was basically it for Ralph's press conference. Nothing. It was one of the short ones, right? One of the ones where they sort of embargo it, and there's an embargo section later on at night that they show a bunch of nonsense. Really, I'm not too bothered. But hopefully, when we get some more comments from him later tonight, you guys will all be able to sort of see that and get up to date with what he said. But that was it for that section. I think the main sort of takeaways, he's had brief conversations with Pogba, but clearly sort of not enough conversations. He did mention the fact that he wants to get to know Pogba and meet him in person, and hopefully he'll be able to do that soon, as Pogba is expected back in the UK today. Of course, he sort of addressed the fact that, there probably are players who aren't happy with playing time, and maybe, loan options will have to be discussed, but at the moment, nothing concrete. I'm still assessing the squad. I'm still getting to know the squad. And so we're not even thinking about January, right now. Don't know whether to believe that or not, but, I'll take him at face value. And obviously he spoke well of Norwich and our position and what we should expect from them. Yeah, another thumbs up press conference for me. I'm not going to sit and rate the press conference, but, I think thumbs up. I liked it. I wish I could have heard more of it, but I liked it. Now back to Martial before we wrap up the video, because we got a couple thousand of you in here and the whole comment section is about Martial. And I will reiterate what I said earlier. I'm not a fan of the way his agent's gone about it, because, his agent said, I'll read out the quote again for anybody who's joined in late. His agent said, Anthony wishes to leave the club in January. He needs to play. He doesn't want to stay in January, and I will speak to the club soon. Now, he said that to Sky Sports. It's not even like he said, like sometimes, with Raiola will say something to some, BK random publication in the middle of Italy somewhere, and it eventually gets over to us, it's just, Raiola will say it to some, just somebody minuscule, tiny, but eventually we'll hear it, or just somewhere random, right? And even though I don't like it, it's like, flipping, I don't even know if I can believe that. I've never heard of that publication, but with Sky Sports, like he said that to Big Sky Sports for the whole world to see and hear, right? Like he was not trying to hide it, right? It's one of these things where clearly he is trying to, shop Martial around, right? Sort of let everybody know, look, Martial's available, start getting your offers in. And the problem with that is he literally said, look, I will speak to the club soon. Why are you saying this to the public if you haven't spoken to the club? And for me as a fan, that's what frustrates me. Like that is annoying, because it's one of these things that it doesn't really help us. Like it doesn't help Man United. That it feels selfish. But then when you look at it from Martial's side, I understand why he wants to leave. The actual way in which he goes about it, we can analyze and we can judge and we can, decide whether or not it's a good thing and whether he's gone about it well. But the actual him wanting to leave, I get it. I totally get it. I don't think there's a problem with that. He's been here for a while. I think most people would say, look, the Martial experiment just hasn't worked out. Look, someone in chat just said that Martial never looks like a happy player. And I think there's an element of truth to that. I think he's somebody who was once in great form and looked like, he could reach the top of the footballing world. People always meme and joke about the Ballon d'Or clause in his contract. And it's like, we can joke about it all we want, but there was reason as to why that was there, right? Like this guy was a baller. Like, and again, you go look at the clips, go look at the highlight videos of the games back then. Go look at how people spoke about him back then, right? People were talking about him as somebody who was going to be a top player, and rightfully so. And he's not been able to reach those heights, as well as the fact that he's played for managers who really hasn't improved him. And that's not just something on Martial. I think you can make that case about a lot of the players, right? Where we look at it and we go, a lot of players haven't really improved for the past couple of years and seasons, right? And so it's a shame, because Ralph, I think, would be the manager. I think if we had Ralph, right after Mourinho, maybe things could have played out differently and Martial would be our undisputed number 9 and we wouldn't even be questioning it. I think there's an alternate reality somewhere where that did happen. But in this reality, he's having to fight for his spot. And with Martial being 26, looking to try get into the France squad for the World Cup next year, I totally get why he wants to leave and go somewhere where he is guaranteed to start. Because ultimately, here he has to fight for his spot. And he's fighting against some of the best strikers in the world and one of the best young talents in world football. And if he doesn't have a good game, he's out, right? Like in our current sort of striker ecosystem, right? If you don't have a good game, or if you're bad, you're out, because we have actual good options to replace you. Whereas I think Martial just needs a place that he can go where it's a bit, lower pressure, and he can be allowed to flourish and improve and develop and start to work on his own game. So yeah, that's how I feel about Martial. Let me know in the comment section what you think. If you're okay with it, let me know where you'd want to see Martial. I'm sure there's lots of people who are part of Martial FC and who are looking forward to the next step in his career and who will follow him closely. I definitely will, because I think he will succeed as a striker. I think wherever he goes, as long as he's given the opportunity to play consistently week in, week out, I think we could start to see the Martial which we all thought we'd see at United. Yeah, that's my thoughts on Martial, but yeah. As well, I'm sure we'll start to hear things now from Lingard, and I saw something the other day about Lingard being offered a contract from like Newcastle or something. We're going to start seeing it, guys. We're in December. What's the date? 10th of December. We're getting closer and closer to January. We've got a couple players whose contracts end at the end of the season. We will start to hear endless amounts of links and stories. So, buckle up, buckle up, and we'll see how that plays out. We'll see what comes out. But for the meantime, my name has been Levin2K. I appreciate you all. We will be back on this channel later tonight. We also got, of course, the watch along tomorrow facing Norwich, so that should be a good one. Be sure to hang out and check it all out. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. There's a lot of people who watching who aren't subscribed, so be sure to subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you all later. Good night.